Next on stage is Ryan Farron, Senior Penetration Tester at BPM. Ryan will be presenting how to physically protect critical networks.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Ryan Farron. Make sure we got everything working here. Green button. All right. So today we're going to talk about physical security. Who am I? So I'm a senior penetration tester for a company called BPM. I was a sysadmin for over a decade, switched to the offensive security team about 8 years ago. I spend most of my time doing technical penetration tests for all the different industries across North America. I run the physical penetration team, and I also am an expert in social engineering. That being said, public speaking is way more stressful than breaking into banks. About 6 years ago, I started to specialize in OT security, working with power companies, water treatment facilities, the list goes on. So that is my specialty. I have a small team, then we work to further this business and become experts in the field. Today, we're going to go over physical security, and I've designed this presentation to mimic my approach as a quote-unquote attacker, right? So we're going to start with the least risky actions and move up the ladder of complexity to very risky stuff. But the whole point of this is to be able to take this information away, go back home, and then you personally secure your own organization. So I encourage questions. Please interrupt me. The whole idea is to get actionable information from this. One of the biggest questions I get when it comes to physical security is, what's a good padlock? Everybody knows and has seen those videos of picking locks, picking those padlocks. There's often booths who have lock-picking little seminars. This is an Abloy lock. That's my recommendations. There's several good options out there. This is an Abloy lock built in Finland. The reason I like this one, it's very well made, and it's a disk detainer lock. So it's a different type of locking mechanism. Stands up to the weather much better and is far more secure. So why physical security, right? This is a cybersecurity event. My mantra is every cyber event has a physical manifestation, right? That's true in any regards, right? We've got a human typing away, that's a physical event. Transmits down to a PLC and maybe changes a valve on the floor, right? So every cyber event has a physical manifestation, and each one protects the other. It's pretty obvious, right? Our doors keep people from entering our server rooms. That's the obvious one. The other side of the coin, and I'm going to use this analogy throughout this presentation, is that cybersecurity can protect physical security. So in the old days, we had that mantra of who owns the box, who physically holds the box owns the box, right? So if I go in and steal a computer, I can take that away, mount the disk, and start to pull information off of it, like local administrator passwords, sensitive files, GPOs, etc. And so cybersecurity comes in on the other side of the coin, where we can enact disk decryption. And that's where we have this two-way street. So why physical security? Why critical networks? Me, as a penetration test, an attacker, if I'm going to show up in person, I'm going to get to that internal network. That's the whole reason for me being there. And so that's what we're going to discuss today. So a little bit about my methodology. When it comes to physical security, there's two sort of main areas, right? Social engineering, in-person social engineering, very, very important. And we're going to discuss some of the facets and how to equip your organization with defenses there. And the other side is the physical security assessment. So once we're done with the whole lying portion, we move to touch all the doors and locks. And there's a big list of physical security items that we go through. We're going to skip today things like cameras and alarms for time considerations, but we'll go over a lot of this today. And again, if you have questions, raise your hand. Feel free to just speak up and interrupt me. I like this image. It might be a little bit hard to see here, but this is a great security image because you've got your vehicle gate and the different ways to bypass those security controls. So we're going to see this over and over again, and this is a very good representation of what I'm going to talk about. So here's my toolkit, or portions of it. Right, we've got a concealed computer. This is a clipboard that I've jammed a whole bunch of equipment into, and I have my work order form, which I put on top of there, and this is my tool to walk in and say, hi, I'm Ryan. I'm with so-and-so. I'm here to upgrade your network firmware. Nonsense, but it works. And this is my main tool to actually get onto a network, to deploy malicious code, to compromise computers, and then retreat and perform the technical penetration test thereafter. We'll see some other tools here. These are called shrums. That's a little bit of piano wire. We've got some plastic milk jug, the best tool in my toolkit. And of course, my awesome tactical pink safety scissors. So as we spoke, there's this double-sided coin, physical security and cybersecurity. The whole point is to get onto that network. So here's an example of my little Raspberry Pi clipboard where I walk in, find a wall jack, it's lit up, I get onto the network, I can touch the domain controller, and I can touch the internet, and that's proof of concept of me deploying a rogue host. So let's begin. Right, this is me actually walking up to your organization trying to gain compromise. And as I said, we're going to start with the least risky actions, and that is, what are your publicly accessible areas, right? If I'm a citizen allowed to be in your facility, that's where I'm going to start, right? Baseball cap, sunglasses, and I'm just going to walk in and find what I can. So let's see what that looks like. So maybe you have a lobby, you've got a kiosk that helps people check in or submit a ticket or even have a payment system, something like that. Those are going to be areas that I'm going to look at first. Are there wires coming off the back? Is that kiosk system locked down so that I can't manipulate it, access a web browser, download malicious code, things like that? So those are the first areas that I see as an attacker, and those are the first areas you should look at. Is that kiosk necessary? Printers, often found in lobbies, the back of the printer is shooting off the back of a desk. That green network wire is coming off the back. If I can touch that, that's a bad idea. Wireless peripherals, we're going to go over that in depth. Wi-Fi access points, we're going to talk more about the physical side of that. We're not really going to get into Wi-Fi, but again, these are things that I'm going to do as an attacker that don't really require a lot of risk. I can attack Wi-Fi from up to a mile away in some cases. The list goes on when it comes to those publicly accessible areas, but in a nutshell, if you have a requirement for a network access device in a public accessible area, we can flip the coin over once again and talk about cybersecurity, right? So we can say, all right, we'll keep people from DHCP, so we'll statically address everything. That's not to say I can't defeat that, though, right? I'll run Wireshark on your network. I'll see what the IP space is. I'll find an IP that's not being used, assign it to myself, and I'm off to the races. Sticky Macs, always good, right? If I can't get onto that port because it doesn't allow my MAC address and it causes an alert, that's a good thing, too. Network access controls, this is quite an extensive actual area. Port security is a common feature on many networking devices that I highly recommend. And then, of course, 802.1x, which you could even equip with like radius authentication. But I will tell you, empirically, I have defeated all of these in the field, including 802.1x, right? So empirical testing is very important. So if you do have 802.1x in your building, set up a computer, get it on like you would any normal workstation, take that MAC address, spoof it, get the same IP address, and try to hit another port. And you might find that it allows both those computers on, and the second one doesn't require authentication because it's already been cached from the first one. So again, we're flipping that coin back over between physical and cyber, and in the end, one has to protect the other, and my recommendations are going to be the physical side. Again, I'm a highly technical person, but when it comes to those initial considerations for securing a critical network, if you don't have the physical down, you haven't done your homework, right? You don't have the fundamentals. So removing things from those public accessible spaces, right? You want to do a good job. You want to have good customer service. You want people to be able to do good work. And these kiosks, these member computers, different things that you have in these publicly available spaces, analyze them if they're actually required, right? If you see that one person used this thing in the entire year, get rid of it. Reduce your attack surface. Payment systems, typically on different networks, but unless you empirically test that and find that out, I've often found ways to hop from that subnet to another. And furthermore, payment systems are definitely a good attack vector, a high-value target for attackers too. So, first thing here that's kind of in depth is wireless peripherals. Right, we're talking wireless mice, wireless keyboards, and the truth is the vast majority of these devices are vulnerable to injection attacks. So it's not the mouse or the keyboard that's necessarily vulnerable, it's the small USB dongle. And if that dongle doesn't encrypt its traffic, that means I can sniff that. These are broadcast packets out there. Then, too much. Then I can actually listen to those. So as a human types their password in, I can listen to those keystrokes and pull those off. Not as common these days, but most common is my ability to inject. So if there's an unlocked workstation, I can fire off a series of keystrokes to that computer, which will, if you could imagine, Windows key R, run a command which downloads malware, execute that malware, and then I retreat. And this can actually happen in nice conditions up to 100 meters away. So I'll sit in the parking lot, find 13 different wireless peripherals, hit them all, and then just call back to HQ and say, how many did you get? We'll probably get on average 25 to 50%. That means we've got up to 6 compromised computers on your internal network. So this is very, very important. Now, I won't go down the rabbit hole too far into this. It's kind of complex when it comes to which makes and models are secure. That's a very common question I get. If you ask me if XYZ is secure, I can tell you one instance that is, one instance that isn't. And the reason is because out of the box, these companies want these to work for the public, right? There's billions of these devices out there. They want success. And so what they'll do is, if the first configuration, which is most secure, doesn't work, it'll downgrade and downgrade and downgrade. And then it'll enact that last one that worked, in which case you could have a very secure device that you paid $100 for, but it just downplayed itself into the least secure mode, and then it's stuck to that mode. And you can't actually change that until you get proprietary software. Question?
Yeah, I've never seen a menu where you could actually go in and check to see if it's encrypted or not, to see what level that is. Do they have those capabilities?
I have not seen that, and that's actually a very good question into the next portion, which is the only way to know is to empirically test it. And this is from my own expertise, having tested thousands of these devices. This is called a Crazy Radio PA. It's a 2.4 gigahertz device. It costs about $20. You can buy them on Amazon. And so I highly recommend picking one of these up to test your own devices. If you have more questions, feel free. I actually offer people, not many people take me up on this, but just mail me one. I'll test it. Takes me about 30 minutes. I'll mail it back to you. Not a big deal. That helps me because I get this better list of what is and isn't secure and what firmware and revisions are. Another question. You're like reading my mind, sir. Linux, and I highly recommend you email me. I can save you hours of tinkering. You do have to flash the firmware on the device and get the drivers correct first. And my first foray into this took me about 4 hours and a lot of headache. So just email me. I'll save you a bunch of time, get you set up. Kali or Debian Linux is a great place to start with this. There's plenty of good documentation out there, but just getting it right out of the box is a little bit tricky, but not impossible. And then once you have it, it's done. It just works, and you can test forever. So yeah, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll save you hours of time. But this is one of the biggest vulnerabilities I find out there in the field that nobody really realizes. Even if you have a policy that says no wireless devices, they still go out to Home Depot or Office Depot, pick one up for $10 and plug it in themselves because it out of the box just works. So this is a big security vulnerability. Yes?
So I apologize, but I had to step out. How did you guys learn about that? How did it come about?
How did I learn about this? I don't recall. It was a very long time ago. We just look for vulnerabilities.
There were no CVEs or anything that came out.
Correct. Correct. And a lot of the things we do as pen testers, we find vulnerabilities that have no associated CVEs, right? We defeat Windows by design over and over again. Another question.
So the crazy PA, is that a different frequency range than the Bluetooth capabilities on the
It is a different protocol, but the same frequency, 2.4 gigahertz. Which is why the Flipper Zero is not the best device yet. We're waiting for the Flipper 1 to come out because it has no 2.4 gigahertz radio.
Does the mouse suffer from the same thing? Can't inject keystrokes?
So it's not actually the mouse or the keyboard, it's the dongle itself. Correct. Correct. Yeah. Yeah, and the universal dongles now that can accept any device tend to be the most promiscuous or vulnerable ones too. Again, this is a big rabbit hole. I could talk about this for hours, so just shoot me an email and I'll help you. I'll send you my list of known devices and revisions that can or cannot be secure. Same goes for Wi-Fi, right? So if we're the attackers and we're trying to just stay away, we don't want to create any risk for ourselves. Wi-Fi is a big, big rabbit hole. But physically, make sure your access points are up and away from public access. You'd be surprised how lazy people get. They just slap them on the wall at knee level. And then if you do require guest access, which is very, very common, just go and purchase another subscription to an internet ISP. Get a cheap switch, put it on there, and then you can sleep easy, right? It's just air-gapped from your network. It's its own space. Worst thing you might get is, a copyright infringement notice from your ISP because some kooky kid was downloading movies on your guest network or something like that. And of course, you can secure those further with other controls. But that's another big question I get is, well, I need guest Wi-Fi. Just put it on its own ISP and you're done. Although there's plenty good controls to have isolation between networks in modern, Cisco Meraki is like a very common one that I see out there. So there's lots going on in Wi-Fi, but we're just going to stick to the physical today. Remaining physical access is going to be like, you'd be surprised what ends up in dumpsters. Shred bins are, unless it's a lock or you have a shredding service, that can happen where sensitive information can be pulled from there, and people love to steal that information. But electronic waste, that's the big one. So as you recycle devices, switches, computers, handhelds, tablets, anything like that, make sure you're securely wiping those. And most people say, oh, I absolutely do, but I spend a lot of my time buying stuff off of government auctions or eBay, and 95% of the time, there's still that configuration on there. I can pull that configuration off. I can pull passwords out of it. And the host name tells me it's XYZ Power Company, right? Not a very good thing. So that's really, really important, is make sure your electronic waste disposal program has security in mind. Conference rooms, people tend to think of their conference rooms as a secure location, but when it comes down to it, do you interview new personnel, right? If you're hiring for a new position, do you have people come in there? Do you sit them down? Do you leave them? Do you have them do programming exercises by themselves? Are they alone, unknown persons alone in this space? There's a computer to present in the conference room. There's wireless peripherals in there. There's all kinds of stuff happening in conference rooms. And as the attacker, you'll see of my mechanisms to get into a building. I go straight to a conference room and just set up shop like I'm supposed to be there. I'll spend hours sometimes in there just trying to break into the network, to defeat those network access controls. And the conference room is my mainstay. Field devices, this is a pretty big deal too, especially where encryption is not in play. I deem this a public accessible space because if you've got like a fleet and everyone's up and running, they got their tickets ready to go, and at 7 a.m. they're all rolling out, but they're getting coffee at 7-Eleven, and they leave their vehicles while they go get coffee, I'm just going to steal those devices, and I've done it. Okay, so we've now gone through those publicly accessible spaces. Avoiding humans is the big part, right? So physical ingress, lots to talk about. I'm going to move quickly here, but in a nutshell, even if you've got a $5,000 steel door with a fancy electronic badging mechanism on it, it doesn't matter. That still can be vulnerable, and I often find those to be the most vulnerable. Big pro tip here, if you are building a new facility, definitely look into the security of the implementation before construction's complete. It'll save you a ton of money, because if there are security vulnerabilities, you're still in the construction phase, you're still under contract, and you have some sort of warranty process to say, hey, you have to go fix these doors. My example is, I walk into a brand new $26 million facility, hundreds of doors. 95% of the doors were installed incorrectly. I was there for a week. They asked me if I wanted to be assigned a key. I pull out my little plastic milk jug, and I say, I have my key, I'm good to go, because all of those doors were vulnerable. It cost them many, many thousands of dollars to fix them all. Okay, this is a big one. This is by far the most common vulnerability I see. This is called an anti-shim pin. You've all seen this. This is your standard sort of lock that you've seen in your house, in your building, everywhere you go. This is the shim pin. So you've got your latch. Behind it is the shim pin. The whole lock mechanism that keeps the door from opening is this shim pin. When the shim pin is depressed, that means the latch can't move. If that shim pin is not depressed, meaning it falls into the void with the latch, and I can manipulate the latch, I can open that door. Doesn't matter what is surrounding it, lasers, nets, rockets, whatever. If I can touch the thing, I can get it open, and it only takes me seconds. This is called a shove knife, and this is actually the door to a bank vault. Now let's say I can't see the shim pin. That's where my plastic milk jug comes in. It'll come around the 90-degree angle, manipulate the latch, and open the door. And so you guys can take this and say, hey, you have access to both sides of the door, so you can actually watch this shim pin. And if that shim pin doesn't sit right there on the latch plate, halfway depressed, that means it's vulnerable. You can listen to it too. If there's 2 clicks, the first click is the latch, the second is the shim pin, that means it's vulnerable. And I do that all the time. I push or pull on that door, and if an extra click goes, that means I can pop it open. Most of the time, I just try anyways to see what happens. Remediation strategies here are going to be, don't allow manipulation of the shim pin, right? We want the shim pin to set where it's going to go, but winter, summertime, the building sets, things move. There's lots of ways to actually get the shim pin to set, but when in doubt, just put a big steel plate that covers 8 inches above, 8 inches below, so that I can't get to the shim pin at all. Vulnerable or not, I won't be able to manipulate the latch, and that's a good way to secure it. Motion sensors, if you look closely here, it's a bit dark, but I have a piece of thin cardboard that I've slipped through the top of the door, triggers the motion sensor, opens the door. This gets me into all kinds of places. And this has to do with fire safety, security getting out. Remediation strategies, second factor, push to exit, plus the motion sensor, then it opens. That's definitely compliant too. Talk to your facilities managers. They'll know all about compliance when it comes to safety. Double doors are the worst. If there's any sort of gap in the middle, I'm going to put all kinds of tools in there, a hook to get the crash bar, the thumb spinners. This is my new tool. It's called a J tool. And I can actually spin the bottom, which spins this little hook up top, which opens that thumb spinner. These are external doors, which allow me to ingress from outside. You can put an astragal to cover that plate or reduce the gap. And the list goes on and on. I could literally talk for a whole day about different kinds of doors. There's an infinite number of implementations of doors and configurations. This is an under-the-door tool that allows me to get to the paddle on the other side if there's an excessive gap at the bottom. My boss has me break into his office whenever he locks himself out this way. No comment. If you're looking for a secure lock, this is a very good example. This is called a mortise lock, and if you look closely, our latching mechanism is multidimensional. Our shim pin is at the bottom, so it's in a whole different plane than the latching mechanism. So it allows the shim pin to succeed far more than the original standard style. Deadbolts are the best. And then, of course, a round knob circumvents that under the door tool that allows you to hook the paddle. Over the top also works if you've got fake ceilings, the false ceilings. I go over all the time. I find ladders, I find brooms to push the paddle, all kinds of things. So this is definitely a far more secure implementation of a physical analog lock. Run out of time here, so we're going to jump into electronic ingress. This is my favorite. This is my expertise. This is a garage door reader for like a vehicle. I bought one of these, jammed a bunch of batteries in it, threw an Arduino in there, and I can now read badges from about 18 inches away. Create a choke point, go to the local taco restaurant at lunchtime, and there's a big line of people from your organization, and I just walk up with my computer bag, and I'll clone all the badges as I go to the front, and then walk out, copy those to my own badges afterwards, and I now can badge my way into your facility. This is a big rabbit hole. There's a lot to talk about here when it comes to secure technologies. HID Prox 2 is by far the most common in North America, and it is easily clonable. Very, very trivial to clone. This is called an iCopy X. It's our most modern attack tool these days. It's been released about a year or two ago, and it can even clone some of the more secure technologies, including iClass. Now, when it comes to iClass, you can see here I've written potentially. Again, where it's the implementation of said system. If you implement the secure SEOS, you've got your multi-class readers on the wall. I can read the badge. I can clone that to a legacy badge, right? I'm downgrading that attack, and if your system still accepts the legacy, I've circumvented your very secure, expensive system. So when it comes to badging systems, definitely look into them. Now, most people are going to say, Ryan, what am I supposed to do? I don't have $500,000 to retool everything. These are going to be your best bet, right? Multi-factor, and I highly recommend multi-factor 6-digit PIN codes on any server room, data closet, IDF, MDF, anything like that. Any secure door, even if it's got an electric lock, even if you've got a secure physical lock, throw one of these on there too as an additional layer, just as we would with remote access to a VPN or something like that. If you still have concerns, you can shield your badge so that I can't read it from afar. It only works on contact, so it'll still work in your holder. You can still reach in, and so your employees can still get through the door. There's other technologies of the clamshell that it only allows the mechanism to work if you open the clamshell. And this is a KeySys device that is, so let's say you have HID Prox 2, you can actually clone your badges to this, where it only engages the signal if you push the button. A nice feature for security professionals where it's like, I need badge 1, badge 2, badge 3, and I know it's insecure and I don't want to have all these crazy things around my neck. This is a nice little feature. It costs about $40 on Amazon. Again, if you have questions about RFID badging systems, this is a huge rabbit hole. All right, we'll wrap up with social engineering. So now I've walked up that spectrum. I've taken care of your public spaces. I've tried to defeat the doors and avoid people to get into your building. If I still can't get in, I'm going to start lying. And this is printer paper wrapped around an old Safeway card. I make them every engagement, and it's highly effective in, oh, I'm Ryan, I'm supposed to be here, and I look like an IT guy. It tends to work more often than not. So train your people to understand that any unknown person needs to be challenged, and give them a playbook. These are some considerations for potential vectors for social engineers. But in a nutshell, all unknown persons needs to be challenged. Escort all people. Make verification calls for any story that's made. Check government-issued ID. That's an important one. Again, I told you the Safeway card with my picture on it does not account for any sort of credential whatsoever. Don't allow access to workstations. These are all policy-driven structures that you should be putting into place as you onboard people to train them throughout all of this. And again, all unknown, unbadged people really need to be verified. If they're not escorted, give people some sort of policy-driven structure to understand. They don't have to go and tackle people, but they need to notify someone and notify the correct personnel so that we can handle unknown persons and vet them accordingly. Please. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Exactly. And then when it comes to the critical infrastructure space, for a lot of you, I have some good examples, right? The weakest part is the vulnerability. Again, we didn't talk about alarms or camera systems or things like that, but when it comes to your very secure facilities, definitely put in network segmentation. We've been talking about that a lot. Additional considerations, you've all seen and heard this a whole bunch, but when it comes to those facilities, just think outside the box when it comes to, do you have glass inside the doors in your field sites, right? Are your wires coming in through a vault in the bottom, et cetera, et cetera? So these are all considerations to make when it comes to your facilities. And that's it for time. I'm happy to talk about this more. But in a nutshell, take this away, go back and look at your doors and your locks to see if they're vulnerable and see if you can't secure them yourselves. Thank you. Thank you.